and I tried to get the car to run him over.
Thanks for that, by the
No
way. Yeah,
problem, and
yeah.
it wouldn't do it, which was a great disappointment for me.
Thanks for that also.
No problem.
It is on.
Hi, everybody. Today I'm talking about autonomous trucks. You heard that right. Self-driving semi-trucks are coming to a highway near you. I'm joined by Chris Urmson, the CEO of Aurora, and Johnathon Ehsani, a professor at Johns Hopkins University. I'm always interested in autonomous vehicles, and self-driving trucks will probably get here in a more widespread way than cars will, although we're seeing a lot of that too. It's critically important for our economy, and of course we have to worry about safety and jobs, but these are some issues that I think we'll have to get ironed in the next couple of years because these are coming barreling right down at you on the highway. So let's get to it. Chris Urmson and Johnathon Ehsani, thank you for coming on. And thanks for joining me here at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center in Washington, D.C. for this special live conversation. Chris, I've interviewed a lot, but I interviewed you in 2023 the last time. At that point, Aurora Driver hadn't done any solo drives on public roads. Now it's done over 100,000 miles, and you plan to expand exponentially over the next 2 years. And Johnathon, you study autonomous vehicles from a public health perspective, and you've searched public's acceptance of them. So as driverless trucking accelerates rapidly, let's talk about the challenges in persuading the public they'll be beneficial for society. There's, of course, all the negatives replacing drivers, although we don't have enough drivers, as most people don't know. So, Chris, explain what Aurora does so people who don't understand.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Kara.
Because
Thanks
all
for
the
having us.
attention goes to Waymos or cars or whatever Tesla's
A-
doing.
And they're doing pretty awesome things,
Yeah.
certainly Waymo. So Aurora, we're on a mission to deliver the benefit of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly. And today we're focused on trucking. And so we have big Class 8 tractor trailers, semi-trucks, driving on the highway. We use a combination of verifiable AI, interesting hardware, things like LiDAR, radar, and cameras to see the world, fancy computers, and then map data, offline data to help these things drive safely through the world. As you said, we're the first and only company operating trucks regularly without a person on it, or without a person in the loop or paying attention for keeping them safe on the road. And it's kind of off to the races. So we have about a handful of them running today. By the end of next year, we expect to have hundreds of them running across the Sun Belt, nobody on board, serving customers, delivering toilet paper and baked goods and whatever else you put in the back of a truck across the country.
And these are on highways, public highways, correct?
That's right. So today we're running on I-45 between Dallas and Houston. We also run between Fort Worth and El Paso on I-10 and I-20. In January, we expect to expand that to be out to Phoenix. So at that point, it's 1,000 miles. And part of the benefit, what we think we can bring with this is, one, a safety improvement. So today, there's somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 people killed in accidents with heavy trucks every year. We believe and we see a fuel economy benefit. So we've done modeling that says we expect between 14 and 34% improvement in fuel economy. And so if you're a trucking company today, that's your third largest expense. So that's a big deal for you as a trucking company. And then for us as a society, that's a really big, meaningful impact for sustainability. And then, of course, because the computer is ever vigilant, because it's looking 360 degrees around it, it doesn't get distracted. It doesn't have an hours of service limitation. So we can move goods almost twice as far as a person driving a truck can without all of the negatives that come along with that person having to drive the truck, right? You should be very thankful for anyone who is willing to drive a truck. If you look around this room, there's literally nothing here that didn't move on a truck at some point. Um, but American truck drivers are 10 times as likely to die on the job as the average American. They have other health challenges. They often have substance abuse challenges. They spend time away from family. It's just a really tough life. And so it's one of the reasons why, we should be grateful that people are willing to do it. But much like, the 20th century wouldn't have occurred without coal miners, it's also a really good thing we don't have people mining coal or the same number of people mining coal as we do today. So that's how, as we think
You're
about it.
looking at it. But they talk about the challenges. The public perception is you're replacing truck drivers, of
Yeah.
which we don't have enough of, which people don't realize.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like, as I look to the future here, my expectation is that if you are a truck driver today, you will be able to retire a truck driver if you want to. Right? The shortage is that dire. Over the next decade, we expect to need another million drivers in the US. And that was before the aggressive policies of the current administration, which are, eliminating a significant fraction of our driver pool with these non-domiciled CDL drivers. And so, if we want the American economy to continue rolling, so to speak, we really need access to drivers. Now, of course, it's a thing, right? That years from now, there will not be as many people driving trucks. Eventually, my expectation is there will be no people driving trucks. And we have to help manage through that transition. As our technology comes to market, we expect it primarily to be driving in the middle mile, at least initially, right? This is the between distribution centers. And these are kind of the less desirable of the truck driving jobs. The ones that people want are the ones where they can stay at home every night, where they do more than drive the truck, where they go to the store and they help unload. They are the customer service rep, they're the sales rep. And that's the jobs that I think that what we're doing
So
certainly.
convincing people that you're not killing off an industry essentially or a job, is that your biggest problem? Not that you're going to
I
be mowed down by an
No,
autonomous.
I don't like, I think our biggest problem is our internal execution and just making sure that we continue to execute well. At this point, the technology is working and that we can bring this to market, and now we just need to scale it and get it out there. I think it's society's decision as to how we accept this technology or don't.
Mhm.
I see my role in that to try to help educate and inform. And then as a company, we try to do our part as well. So we've worked with Allegheny College in Pennsylvania, Gallatin College in Montana. We've worked with Over the Road Garage in Texas to put in place training programs to help elevate truck drivers into other roles in
So you're
logistics.
doing that part of it. Jonathan, what do you think the public feels about trucks? They're a little better about trucks, correct?
Yeah, I mean, trucks are essential to the economy, as Chris mentioned.
Hmm.
They're also truck drivers, just the premise is that they're among the safest drivers on the road. In terms of crashes per mile driven, they're extremely safe. However, when there is a crash, it's catastrophic, often not for the truck driver, but for the person or the object that's struck.
Yeah, I've been there.
So it's terrifying.
Not close to an accident.
Yeah. So I think the public acceptance of trucks is different to autonomous vehicles just because of the physics involved. However, as Chris mentioned, as they kind of grow the grow the platform and demonstrate safety time and time again, then public trust will build and experience hopefully will kind of yield the the expectation that these are safe and they're part of a kind of an integrated transportation system.
What do you think the biggest public problem they face in rolling out trucks? Cars are different. We'll talk to Darrell about that in a minute. But is it the autonomy itself or the job loss? Just no one's there essentially.
Yeah, I think it's probably a collection of things, right? In our public policy and kind of public opinion research, we found that trust is an issue. The safety, the transparency, all of those become kind of one of the key pillars. But another one, which I think is often overlooked, is social good. If the vehicles, if the trucks or autonomous vehicles are being used for social good, we see public opinion double in terms of acceptance of accepting these vehicles on the road. So I think the industry can advance both through forging credibility through safety, but also through demonstrating that the social impacts are not only going to be minimizing job losses, but also serving society.
Right. So through climate or efficiency, or they go through the night so they're not as unsafe during the day, that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Yeah.
Right, because the computer never sleeps, presumably. So explain how the technology for people who don't, the people are becoming increasingly familiar with
Yeah,
autonomous vehicles. I've been in them
a
forever.
lot. Yeah.
I feel very comfortable in them, but most people have not tried them. A lot in San Francisco, they certainly have gotten initially hesitant, and we've had our beefs with them and stuff like that. But in general, it's acceptance is rising. Those are commercial. Those are consumer vehicles, just like a
Yeah.
taxi. Talk about the Aurora driver and how it works, so people understand.
Yeah. So, and my experience, by the way, has been very much the same as yours, that you can get very skeptical people and you get them in a vehicle for just a few minutes even. And, it quickly goes from, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, to that's kind of all it does, to, huh. okay, what's my phone doing?
Yeah.
Right, and this
Right.
happens within
Text.
about
Yeah.
10 minutes or so.
Yeah. I had someone get in and I said, "Look, you can text and drink."
Yeah,
Like, which isn't funny. It's a bad joke on drink driving,
but
but
there is a
they laughed.
there's a thing underneath there, right, which is our solution to problems like texting and driving, drinking and driving has been prohibition.
Mhm.
And the challenge with prohibition is you want to do the thing that you're being told not to. The benefit with a technology like this is it enables you to do the things that you find more valuable, whether that's the social activity and drinking or whether it's, dealing with your text or your email, while also having improved safety on the road.
So
And
explain what the actual
yeah,
technology
sorry.
is.
So the
Nobody's in these trucks, right?
so
Not you had drivers along.
So we have a person riding on board as observer, but they are not there to drive. They're not there to keep the thing safe. The way it works is we've got a collection of sensors. So we use laser, radar, camera, and a special laser we developed in house that can see hundreds of meters down the road. That's looking 360 degrees around the truck, understanding what's happening there, and then many times a second, it's both figuring out what it should do in response to the traffic to get where it wants to go safely, but then literally thousands of times a second, it's also checking itself, checking the truck to make sure everything is in a safe and operating as it should be, so that if something is broken, it can identify that and come to a stop off the freeway somewhere safely. This is, our approach to doing this is something we call verifiable AI. It's a way of using some of the most modern techniques that I'm sure you've talked about on the podcast, and in this session, but putting guardrails around them and allowing us to make them it interpretable so that we can ensure that the concepts that it's learning are the ones that actually matter to driving safely and that it's actually responding to them and that it's constrained in how it can respond. Because what we can't afford to have is, what they're, generally called confabulations, right? This
Yeah.
idea, let's use glue to hold the cheese on our pizza,
Right.
right? Like that's cute when I read it in a text box and it's disastrous operating at 70 miles an hour down the freeway.
Right.
And so by construction, we ensure that we can't take some of those actions that are completely, ludicrous, and we have these guardrails.
Would it do that? Like, Cybertruck, I just think I shall run into it.
No, we do not run into Cybertrucks.
Gentle tap is fine with me, but
I And I think this is why you don't work at Aurora, right?
correct.
Yeah. But, no, so we do understand vehicles on the road. We understand, people. We understand bicyclists. We understand trucks, Jersey Bear, like the stuff that matters, we respond to. And by separating the way we understand the world from the way we interact with it, again, we can make sure that it's actually responding to the vehicle or the painted lines and not some random signal that it kind of divined in the background. And that's not like a hypothetical problem. We've done experiments where we're trying to see, okay, how can we reduce the sensor input that's going to this? And eventually we were like, okay, well, let's try it with no sensor input. And it turned out it worked 90% as well as when we put the sensor input in. And
Mhm.
we're like, that seems crazy. Of course, you need to see the world to drive safely. And it turns out that what it had been doing is learning, well, basically, if I look at the last 5 seconds of driving, if I do that for the next 5 seconds, it's going to be mostly right most of the time.
Right. So there's no such thing as mostly right.
That's right. We need to be
So
right.
that would be AI guessing again, right? Essentially.
It's yes, and it's also it figuring out what it thought was a smart way to cheat.
Mhm.
And we don't want it to cheat. We
You
want it
want
to
it
make
to
sure it's
whatever the
using
sensor happens
yeah,
to be at the
exactly.
moment rather than
Whatever the best signal, best way to interpret the data it gets from around it. I think one of the concepts is actually really interesting. What makes these things superhuman is one, they can look in all directions at the same time. So if I'm driving down the freeway, I don't, many of you have had this experience, right? You shoulder check, and then as you come around, the vehicle in front of you hit the brakes and it's kinda terrifying. Um, the Aurora driver is looking at that vehicle in front of you and the vehicle beside you and the person stood on the sidewalk and the person looking at the corner and is thinking about all of them constantly. And so as a person, we foveate on the thing we think is the biggest risk and we'll miss other actors. And that's a real opportunity for us as,
for the
as
truck
we implement the
drivers,
driver to
right?
be
But
safer.
but one of the things that you don't want you wanted to teach other trucks these instances, but not rely on that patterns.
We certainly want to learn from them, and we use that as part of how we train the system, but we also want to represent things explicitly. So, as an example, there's this great study that looked at how often people actually stop at stop signs in America.
Never.
You're not
That's me. I'm sorry.
you're not wrong. It's about 11% of the time, right? And so if you just trained the system to look at how people drove, you'd have robot cars driving through stop signs.
Yeah.
And, maybe society would accept that, but I don't think they should. And so we want to be explicit about, okay, no, this is a real constraint. You should stop at a stop sign,
Right.
rather than hope it figures
Although I
it
have
out.
to say, we'll talk with you do notice autonomous vehicles, like they used to drive like your grandma, and now they drive like your aunt who's a good driver and a little more aggressive. And I've just noticed they've gotten more aggressive,
And I think
over time.
finding that right, and I think you see exactly
Because
this,
then they were going too slow. You're like, really?
and that doesn't quite work,
Yeah,
right?
really. The plastic bag, you're going to stop for the plastic bag. Like
Eh,
that's
please don't, yeah.
yeah.
And this is the art, right? And this is where some of these modern techniques become really useful because you can say something like, "You should stay 3 seconds behind the vehicle in front of you." That's a good rule of thumb driving down the freeway. Most drivers don't, but let's say we wanna maintain that, and we can do a little better because our reaction time is better than people. But what happens when that driver cuts right in front of you, right? You don't wanna hammer the brakes and instantly create 3 seconds of separation. But you don't wanna wait until next week to have 3 seconds of separation. There's some natural process that feels human-like and is acceptable of
Which
creating that
they're
gap.
learning as they're doing it through
And
AI.
that's where these kind of modern techniques really come to the
Right.
forefront.
Right.
Like, we can say at steady state, keep, in our case, something less than 3 seconds, but roughly 3 seconds. And in transition, learn how to open that gap.
Right, because it matters a great deal more with
Yeah.
trucks. So, Jonathan, you're bullish on autonomous vehicles and the ability to reduce traffic deaths, speaking of knowing when to stop. Talk about traffic deaths and injuries, because that to me is the greatest, one of the greatest inputs. And what are some of the potential externalities? For example, an increased capacity to haul freight could lead to more emissions, which would lead to negative health. The more we can do it, the more they will,
Yeah.
essentially.
Thanks. This is a terrific question. Motor vehicle crashes are a public health crisis. I mean,
Yep.
we in this country alone last year.
Which we've accepted, like gun shootings.
Exactly. And I think we've accepted it for really, terrible reasons, for the cost of doing business, for the cost of getting places. We've accepted last year, NHTSA, the US DOT's safety agency, estimates 39,345 lives were lost in 2024. And that's about 100 lives a day are lost from crashes. The potential for the autonomous vehicles and autonomy in general is that they can learn from their mistakes,
Mhm.
which regular drivers, human drivers,
Don't.
us, generally don't. Say, for example, I didn't sleep well last night, or I was taking some medication that meant that I was very, very drowsy, or I was impaired, or whatever it may be. Today, we allow anyone to drive, basically, and many people who may not be fit to drive. So I think the role of autonomy in getting to safety is critical. The challenges or the externalities that you point out is that autonomy will solve some safety issues, but then it will introduce new ones potentially.
Hmm.
So right now, when I'm driving a vehicle, there's no privacy or cybersecurity threat. But autonomous vehicles as a system are vulnerable to.
Well, there are some because they can program cars that people are driving in. There's so much stuff on the cars now.
There is today, right? There is.
Yes.
And the mix of the vehicle fleet such now is that
Yeah.
that is penetrating the vehicle, and there is kind of cyber and privacy concerns today. But if you look at the traditional fleet, I think it's a mix of kind of
Sure.
old school vehicles, kind of more instrumented or tech,
Mhm.
tech heavy vehicles, and then the fully autonomous vehicles. And so I think as those technologies penetrate the fleet, we introduce a new set of challenges. They're not insurmountable. We just have to be very clear-eyed about what they are and how to navigate them.
And then in terms of once they can use them, they'll use them a lot more, which means emissions will presumably go, unless they're electric, right? Or except that kind of thing. If it's going hand in hand, EVs, and although we're seeing a decline in that today, Ford just took a massive right there.
You're raising a terrific question about, the mobility system in general. Like, how will it play out in terms of convenience and access, public transit? What's going to happen to buses and trains, investment, and so on? Those are questions that we still need to figure out.
Mhm.
I think the economic model of the autonomous vehicles themselves is also something that we're only at the very beginning of figuring out.
Right.
And so, understanding how this is going to scale to operate at society level is going to take some time.
So a lot of human drivers are nervous around semi trucks for good reason, right? But I'm nervous around every semi truck in existence, actually. If the car gets hit by an 18-wheel on a highway, passengers don't do well, as you noted. And even though autonomous trucks are much safer than human drivers, there's no perfect system. And often it's a human's fault, typically, right? I know that. I've seen the statistics. But they have, as we just talked, cyber attacks. So what are the failures that you're looking for now? And maybe explain what conditions are you particularly looking at right now
Yeah.
as you move to hundreds of thousands of driving hours?
Yeah. So part of how we've approached this is to build something we call a safety case.
Mhm.
And because there's no silver bullet, I can't say do A and you're done. Our safety case is really this, kind of a holistic view at both the company and the technology to make sure that the thing that we put on the road is safe. So in our case, it's got 5 pillars. The first is that it needs to be performant. So when it's driving, that it behaves the way it's supposed to, it responds appropriately. And we put the thing through something like 4.5 million tests to have conviction that, yep, this is going to behave as it should on the road. The second is that it has to be fail safe, that it's not okay for us to say, oh, that broke. That's why this accident happened. We need to be able to identify what might break. We do all these kind of systems engineering things like FMEAs and DFMEAs and hazard analyses that allow us to get convinced that, okay, we've thought about the way this could break systematically, and we've used that to design the system so that should that computer fail or this tire blow out or that sensor fall off the truck, that the vehicle's going to be find a way to respond safely to that, not create undue risk on the roadway. The next is we need to be continuously improving, right? As you point out, we're human and fallible. And so we need to be able to have processes at our company where we learn from what we see in the field, where we learn from our new experiences, and we feed that back in to refine the requirements, refine the system, and make it incrementally safer over time. We need to be resilient, which means that we need to foresee how people are going to misuse the technology. And importantly, we need to be robust to cybersecurity attack or cyber attacks,
Which are
right?
which are open. That's one of your biggest challenges.
Well, it is no, I actually agree with you that today's vehicles
Are
have enough, right, have enough footprint that you can do real damage with a cyber attack if you could do it in a broad-based way.
Mm.
It's a lot easier to do damage to a vehicle by going up and physically touching it,
Mhm.
right? And so I'm not particularly worried about any individual vehicle because it's just cheaper, easier to go and cut a brake line or stab the tires or do
Right.
whatever. And so we do have, like a 50-person
Wh
cybersecurity
But
team.
you're in the Southwest, very straight roads, highways which are standardized around the country, which
Yep.
is good for you, and so you have something that's pretty you know what a highway looks like. Wherever you drive, a highway is a highway,
I think that's one
and they're
part of it.
flat and warm, correct?
They're not always warm. It's
But
pretty cold in Texas right now.
okay, but it's
Um,
not heavy
it's
snows.
not heavy snow, and but that's not really so the shape of the road is not really the thing you worry about.
Mhm.
That's like we solved that in computer science and robotics decades ago.
Mhm.
It's really the interaction with other actors in the road, and this is one of the places where I think people have had this misconception about, city driving hard, freeway driving easy. And the truth of the matter is, you're right. Most of the time driving down the freeway because it's kinda straight and it's limited, it's pretty easy. The problem is we don't care about the most of the time. That's not the limiter. If most of the time we could have launched self-driving cars 20 years ago, what we really care about is those events. And what happens is all the crazy stuff you see in the city, you see on the freeway, but you're moving at 70 miles an hour with a hell of a lot more kinetic energy.
Mhm.
And so the outcomes are worse. And so we have to be really careful. We have to push the perception horizon out. We literally see people running across the freeway, 5 lanes of freeway in Dallas or in Houston, you know, 60-mile-an-hour traffic, person playing Frogger going across the road. We saw, a police chase going the
Mhm.
wrong way down the road, right? And so we need to think about those. We need to design the system to be robust to them
Yeah.
even in those situations.
People are crazy. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm aware.
Uh,
So it is all.
disappointingly so.
It
Yeah.
is. So, Jonathan, but people have to decide when safe is enough, right? And I'm going to agree with Elon Musk here for a second. But one of the things he said, when one bad thing happens to one of his cars, it gets tons of attention. He was whining again about it. But he's right. Like, people get in accidents all day long, or, there's all this damage by gas guzzling vehicles. But we've sort of gotten used to that.
Yeah.
What has to change? Is it younger people? What are the main factors? Is it just older people have to just die, and then like younger people are comfortable in them?
So I think there's
Sorry,
hopefully
folks.
hopefully none of those bad things is going to happen. But
Right.
I think there's a paradox that you've just pointed out, that we hold these vehicles to a higher standard than we do to ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think, the truth is that it feels scary to put your trust in something that you don't understand or don't know how to relate to. Um, I think there's also a challenge that we all face, which is something we haven't resolved about the transportation system in general, which is that, we've never answered this question before. Like, no one ever sat back and asked how safe is safe enough for any of the vehicles that we have, for any of the systems that we have. So I think autonomous vehicles are forcing us to kind of ask questions that have always been there.
Mm.
These are deep questions. And I think part of this is also bumps up against human values. I think what we're really feeling the friction on is like, I don't want to be killed by a machine.
Right.
Well, guess what? You don't really want to be killed by anyone, but today it can happen.
Right.
And so I think what we need to center is, what do we want out of our transportation system? We want a safe system for everyone, for all road users.
Mhm.
And autonomous vehicles are kind of adding a lot of momentum to that conversation, because they're forcing us to kind of come to grips with things that we really haven't resolved for 100
Right,
years.
for a long time.
Yeah.
Besides getting seatbelts and airbags,
Right.
there hasn't been a lot of that. So let's pivot to jobs. As we said, we talked a little bit, but you basically said trucking jobs aren't good, and Aurora will create better jobs, right? But you haven't been able to persuade the Teamsters Union, which represents truck drivers, or the Owner Operator Independent Drivers Association. They fought you in court and in state houses, and promises of new jobs. You've got to give them the jobs, right? Presumably. So talk about why they're continue to push back on you.
You have to ask them why they continue to push back on us.
Right.
That's their
Okay. I'm
perspective.
asking you.
I, I from our perspective, right, and everyone can have their own perspective. That's
It's not a
why we
surprise that they're doing that.
No, it's not, right? They have an entrenched interest that they're defending.
Have they been a real detriment to you? Obviously, unions are losing power
so-
across the country, but
What I would say is that we are a democracy. We have elected policymakers, and they're forcing a conversation, right? And I may not agree with their viewpoint. I have a viewpoint, and we're having the conversation. And to date, consistently, the conversation is netted out on the side of progress,
Hmm.
right? That they have challenged in many states and pushed for requiring a driver in a driverless truck, and they've lost every time to date. Right, and I think that is because there's a compelling argument around road safety. There's a compelling argument around economic growth. There's a compelling argument around sustainability, and importantly, as you kind of alluded to, this is probably the biggest change in transportation infrastructure in a century. The internal combustion engine,
Yeah.
1914,
Right.
right? That built the 20th century American success. Right, that allowed us to have interstate commerce and grew that basically built America. Ultimately enabled us to win World War II, right? It was kind of the platform that lifted the American economy. This will be the next platform for transportation, and we cannot afford to cede that to our adversaries. And, this is the other winning argument, right? China is pursuing automated vehicle technology aggressively, and I don't believe that
they are indeed.
Aurora.
Although China's always like China, like whenever they want to. Like,
Yeah,
argue.
but there's a reality
There's
to it,
some yes.
right? In that, I think it was a legitimate concern we would have about having the American internet run through Chinese hardware.
Certainly.
And if we were concerned about the bits, we should be equally concerned about the atoms, right, that will move on these trucks. And then so we've got regulation in the US, but this competition is gonna play out globally.
Mhm.
And I believe
I assume you have aspirations of global.
we would love to, right? We would ultimately like to be driving equipment around the world. And I think that having a US underpinned transportation economy globally is much better for the world and better for the US than having a Chinese
There's certainly a
underpinned
lesson in
economy.
BYD, which is taking over the whole world. Well, we're not.
And why? Because we collectively did not, get behind electric vehicles in the same way that the Chinese government
China's
did.
did.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, we have seen this pattern before in transportation, these changes, the automation improves safety, but also eliminated job categories. But in aviation, there used to be a pilot, a co-pilot, in commercial cockpits. There used to be a radio operator, a navigator, a flight engineer. But planes are safer than ever, right? For the most part, except in disasters. But from a public health and policy perspective, what happened with that transition? Because it's still a vibrant industry for some of it. It's just not as many people. They don't need as many people. And it's someday, they're working on autonomous planes right now, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of planes could presumably just kind of fly themselves. You know,
They
you
they
have
can
the
now.
you have the pilots there and the co-pilots for keeping an eye on things. As a transportation researcher, I think we can definitely look to the past to learn lessons about the future. Well, these transitions are going to take some time. I mean, I think I'm fundamentally optimistic and bullish on autonomy and autonomous vehicles and trucking. But I think, one thing to keep in mind, and perhaps it's not the kind of popular view, is that these transitions are going to take time. Right now, the vehicle fleet in this country takes about 30 years to turn over. And so if every single vehicle sold today was fully autonomous and every truck, it's going to take us really until 30 or so years until we see this mixed turnover. So I think we've got time for this transition to take place and to manage these transitions. I think what we need to be clear-eyed about is what is our vision for the system and what's our pathway to get there. And part of our pathway is we don't want big social externalities like loss of jobs. Okay, that's part of our pathway. Let's prioritize that. Let's put that in the center. Right now, it doesn't feel like we've got a clear vision or a coherent pathway to get there. And so I think that's part of the challenge that we're trying to resolve.
Yeah, clear vision and coherent pathway is not really America these days. But Department of Transportation recently approved Aurora warning device,
Yeah.
replaced the reflective triangles truckers use when they stop on the side of the road, and took a lawsuit to get there, though.
Did.
The DOT says it's developing regulations specific to automated trucks right now, but basically there aren't any. What's it going to take to get updated federal regulations here?
I think getting to the point where there's something to regulate, right? I've actually been pretty, um positive about the way the federal government has approached this, that they've put guidelines in place. The idea that there's no regulation is is not accurate.
Well, you're under trucking regulations.
We're under trucking regulations and car regulations, and there's always a backstop, right? That both at the state and federal level, if the state authorities or the federal authorities believe you're creating unreasonable risk on the roadway, you can kick those vehicles off the roadway.
Mhm.
We've seen that actually in use with Uber back in the day,
Mhm.
where they were kicked out of both Arizona and California.
Yeah, that
And
works.
so there is a stick that's available.
Mhm.
But to answer your question directly, I think there is value in federal regulation because this is fundamentally an interstate commerce issue,
Mhm.
and that avoiding 50 different regulations would be helpful. Now, we don't need it. That we will adapt and work and
But there'll be
handle the
certain
friction.
states that are more willing than
And
others.
and today, the vast majority of US states are, either open to or enthusiastic
Mhm.
about this technology. And when it comes to the warning triangle thing, like, again, it's great that we got this waiver. We would have found a way to drop triangles if that was it.
Mhm.
But it's also common sense,
Right.
right? The truck drivers walking down the side of the freeway to drop cones is immensely dangerous. And other ways that like, other vehicles that are stopped on the freeway, what they do, they turn on blinking lights because that's better than walking down the freeway and putting cones. And, the technology breakthrough we had for this was turn on blinking lights on the
Mhm.
truck.
Brilliant.
So, yeah,
Brilliant.
that's what we do at Aurora.
And that took a lawsuit to get
Well, and we've got a waiver from them. The lawsuit has moved on, and we're now engaged constructively.
So
And
what were you against the the cone people?
Yeah, big cone was
Well,
keeping us down. Yeah.
I
No, so there's a rule on the books from
I
like
even believe you should win on that one.
yeah, on big cone. Yeah, we did too. And ultimately we're kind of continuing through the process.
Mhm.
And it, what we see with the current administration is that Secretary Duffy's innovation agenda is pretty well aligned with this. We've seen positive comments from the secretary and from the vice president about the importance of automated trucking. We've seen legislation introduced at the federal level by Representative Fong from California, who's a Republican, called America Drives.
Mhm.
And so we're seeing some momentum here.
Mhm.
And I think that's great. And
Was
we'll
that
see where
different with Democrats?
it depends on which Democrats.
Mm.
Under the Obama administration, that was when I first started talking with Secretary of Transportation and DOT about this. Very enthusiastic and positive. Under the first Trump administration, enthusiastic and positive. The Biden administration was not focused on this at all.
Mhm.
And then with this administration, we're seeing, again, support.
Right. So um, now universities are one of the few institutions that are structurally designed to think beyond political and market considerations. So, Jonathan, as an academic researcher who talks to lawmakers, policymakers, industry stakeholders, um, do universities have any role in the web of interest between private industry and government agencies?
Definitely. I think I can speak from my own experience with respect to transportation safety in this area is that universities offer kind of a neutral and independent place for data, for ideas, and for kind of arbiters of new technologies and emerging things in the innovation ecosystem. And so I think in that way, they become a kind of a one of the pillars that can advance the innovation in this country and the competition. We see this all the time, actually. And I think one of the, uh, you know, we poke fun at academics for taking forever to write a paper or so on, but
Mhm.
there's more and more industry leaders and companies coming to universities and wanting to work with us on issues related to safety and autonomy.
And the broader AI advancements in
That's
public
right. That's right.
transportation, right?
And I'd say beyond that, I think what's most striking about this is that it's often the leaders who are coming to us. It's almost like those who are ready to prove their technologies work and that they're safe come knocking. And I think in a way, it's a test. I think the other role that universities can play in this ecosystem is that they can begin to advance the kind of the broader societal agenda of the public good that can come of these. So one real opportunity that exists with autonomous vehicles and trucks is that once one catastrophic thing happens, it should never happen again because the entire vehicle fleet should learn from it.
Mhm.
And so the opportunity for something like data pooling for safety critical
Between
incidents
all the companies.
between all the companies, it's not happening right now.
Right.
But universities could form consortia where these data are shared. There's precedent. It happens in the aviation industry already. And everyone can learn from those events.
Right. They're not operating autonomously from a
Right.
safety point of view. Airlines are. That's certainly a good comparison.
Yeah. So I think that in that way, I think universities and research can play a critical role
Mhm.
in advancing this and not slowing down the industry. I think that's the other kind of stereotype is that, things are moving quickly. Academics and researchers can move rapidly with them.
With them.
Yeah.
So, Chris, right now you have no competition really that I can see it, but at some point, there's going to be other successful autonomous trucking companies, including from China, as you noted. You'll have to compete on price, speed. Pressures will be to cut costs to get from point A to point B faster. Um, Presumably, there's at least one company that's willing to cut corners in order to gain market share. That's often a way to do it. How do you look at? I mean, there's more competition uh, in the autonomous vehicle, the
Yep.
car space, than there is in the truck space. Why is that? And you moved from the car space to the
We
truck.
did. We were intending to operate cars and vehicles, and we decided to focus on trucks because we just think it's a better, more impactful market for us to go after, and one where we think we have some unique advantages. Um, how do we think about the kind of the impact of pressure for shipping versus safety? It's like I mentioned, the company's mission is deliver the benefits of self-driving technology safely, quickly, and broadly, and that safely is first for a reason, and it's kind of a decision-making paradigm for us, right? Do it safely, move as quickly as you can, think about scale. For us, when we talk to our customers, the trucking companies, safety is top of mind for them. And so by continuing to be transparent, right? If you want to see something really boring, youtube.com at Aurora Driver, we live stream the Aurora Driver every day, right? That kind of transparency builds trust. And we think the customers who have an experience with us, work with us, we set the standard for what it means to be safe on the road. It's gonna be hard to unseat that.
Unless, like, there's a catastrophic accident, right, with you in the middle of it.
And again, part of building trust is also to position yourself for forgiveness,
Mhm.
right? That by demonstrating that we're doing these things the right way, that we've taken the steps, that we engage appropriately with the regulators and the policymakers, that we're transparent about this, you know, it's how you get through those moments. And I actually think it's warranted, right? That we are doing something new. There should be scrutiny. We should be held to a standard. And what happens, you remember the days, right? The very first days of the first accident we had at Google with the self-driving car,
Mhm.
national news,
Yes.
right? And then the second one, slightly less visible, national news. At this point, just given the scale of operations, I am sure there is a Waymo crash every day,
Mhm.
right? Not because they're bad, not because there's any kind of problem with the system, just because of scale and people on the road
Well, they had a
bumping
good one
into
in
'em.
San Francisco the other day where 3 of them were facing off.
That one made national news.
Yeah,
But
that was good
but that was novel,
That was
right?
in my neighborhood, yeah.
But what happens is people are like, "Okay, we've scrutinized this, we get it, we understand it. Okay."
Yeah.
Right?
Chris and I were joking, that just happened to me the other day with some lady who was texting and driving and wouldn't move her car out of the middle of the road, so it's common for people, but as you
People
said.
make mistakes, yeah.
So last question, we only have just 2 minutes. Let's fast forward 10 years. I'm driving down a busy stretch of Interstate 95 here on the East Coast, which is one of
Yep.
the most busy roads. In December of 2035, I probably shouldn't be driving, so I'll be really old, but,
Be driven by some
whatever.
self-driving vehicle,
I'm
yeah.
driving probably. I don't actually like to drive. It's after dark. It's windy and snowing. Driverless freight trucks are all around me. I hate driving around trucks in general, especially on 95. What happens for that to be a totally normal occurrence? What has to happen? Jonathan first, and then Chris.
The safety first has to be
That I don't feel I feel nervous around trucks when I
Yeah.
drive now.
And so the paradigm that Chris articulated, the safety first, is going to build trust, and it's going to be demonstrating time and again also the learning that's happening with these vehicles, so that they've been in this situation, they've learned, they know how to operate, they know also how to handle the unpredictability of human drivers. Because I think part of the challenge here is that the mix of road users is going to create new vulnerabilities. And so I think you may actually end up driving with more confidence in that circumstance than what you would now.
Oh, I'd like to get all people off the road. That's my goal. But I wrote a column in the New York Times where I said, owning a car will be as quaint as owning a horse someday, which I didn't think would happen. But so you think safety is the critical thing, that people feel safe. What about you, Chris? Final word.
I think that's it, right? I think as a company, we need to continue to execute. We're doing a great job of that today, but we need to continue to put safety first. And I think you will be safer on the road, right? In those situations, I joke that, what a person does is they drive down the road and they can't see anything, so they drive at freeway speeds.
Mhm.
It's like faith-based driving. There's nothing there.
Mhm.
And the self-driving truck is going to go, oh, geez, that's a blizzard. I can only see so far. I'm going to slow down,
Mhm.
right? And that will enable the roadway to be safer. And you'll avoid these 120 car pileups that you have in snowstorms today, because it just won't happen, because these vehicles are controlling their speed appropriate for the conditions in a way that people are too impatient and too self-confident to really do themselves.
Mhm. So when will they be on 95?
Certainly before 10 years from now.
Before 10 years from now.
Yeah.
So that's the goal, is to
Yeah.
get them all over the country.
We expect to be driving, like I said, across the Sun Belt next year, and then we'll start to work up through the country. People make a big deal about snow. It's not that big a deal. When you're building an engineering system, you want to kind of find the parts that you can get done and get that out and get out and benefit from it. And then you add little bits here and there. And we've done that over the course of this year, driving from just daytime to day and night to, in January, day, night, and in the rain. Snow is just another thing to add at some point.
And where's the worst place that you're like, oh, I better not go there?
Ooh.
No trucks.
I have seen those crazy internet videos of traffic in India. I think we're going to be a little ways off from that.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Chris Urmson and Jonathan.
Thanks so much.
On with Kara Swisher is produced by Christian Castro-Russell, Michelle Alloy, Megan Burney, and Kaylin Lynch. Nishat Kurwa is Vox Media's executive producer of podcasts. Special thanks to Catherine Barner and Madeline LaPlante Doobie. Aaliyah Jackson engineered this episode, and our theme music is by Trackademics. If you're already following the show, you get a free traffic cone. If not, you'll be stuck watching the Aurora YouTube live stream all day. Thanks for watching. See you on Thursday.